De prijswinnende Amerikaanse regisseur David Lowery wisselt grote Hollywood-producties moeiteloos en succesvol af met spraakmakende indiefilms. Zo imponeerde hij met zijn doorbraakfilm Ain't Them Body Saints en latere titels als Pete's Dragon, A Ghost Story, The Old Man and the Gun en The Green Knight. Op Filmfest Gent, waar David Lowery te gast is, spreken we de regisseur over de belangrijkste films en lessen uit zijn carrière. I guess we probably wouldn't have been here talking about your movies if it wasn't for a certain guide to making Star Wars.
Yes.
A book that your mother gave to you around the age of 7?
7, yeah. I wish I still had it. I wish I could find it. I'm sure it's on eBay.
Oh, you don't have it anymore?
No, it was a library book.
Oh, it was a library book.
Yeah. I've been slowly tracking down all the books that I had as a child about making movies, and that's one I haven't found yet.
But it had a big influence.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, how did it influence you in becoming, or the wish to become a filmmaker?
I think it was just the notion that there was someone behind the feelings that I got when I watched, at that age, Star Wars, because that was my favorite film, or the original trilogy. The idea that someone could orchestrate that was really compelling to me. And it also just seemed fun in the same way that a magic trick is fun. So it just, I liked to draw pictures a lot. I was very artistic as a child, and it just felt like a natural extension of the type of artistry I was already drawn towards.
We are here at Filmfest Gent, the festival that you also visited about 9 years ago.
9 years ago,
when
yes.
Ain't Them Body Saints premiered.
Yep.
Well, if you take a look back, 9 years ago, what do you think is the biggest difference between David Lowery, the director then, and now?
I've got more gray in my beard, that's about it.
It must be more than that.
There's more to it than that. I'm more confident than I was back then.
Yeah?
I still have a deficit of confidence, but I have more than I did back then. And I know what I want more clearly and with more focus when I'm on set than I did back then, and know how to get it. So I'd say those are there's a clarity of vision to what I do now that I didn't have back then, because in 2013 I was used to making independent films where you have to kind of just roll with the flow. Mm-hmm. Really just improvise your way through the circumstances under which you're making the movie. And now I've been lucky enough to be able to control those circumstances more, which demands that I have a clearer and more concise vision for what it is that I'm after. Yeah. But I also have the means to execute that vision now.
We're here to discuss 3 of your movies. The first of them being Pete's Dragon. A very moving and magical Disney adventure about an orphaned boy named Pete and his best friend Elliot, who happens to be a dragon. Mm-hmm. That must have been quite a career move after making 2 smaller scale indie, lower budget films, Saint Nick and Ain't Them Body Saints. What attracted you to this large-scale production?
It wasn't the size of it so much as it was the chance to make a movie that would really feel magical, and also that would appeal to audiences of all ages. You know, as someone who decided he wanted to make movies when he was 7, I wanted to make a movie that 7-year-olds could watch. Yeah. And that was sort of my target audience. I was like making a movie for myself when I was 7 years old. So that, it wasn't expected, and I wasn't planning on jumping straight into making a big budget family film, but when the opportunity arose, I couldn't think of anything that I would rather do.
What did making this film teach you about working within a major studio system like Disney?
Well, the first thing I realized on the first day of shooting was that as soon as you start rolling cameras, it's exactly the same as making a tiny micro-budget movie.
It is.
Like, the system doesn't change in terms of the actual practical applications of making a movie, because you have actors and you have a camera, and even though there's all this other accoutrement around and the crew can get quite large and you have a lot of trucks, the actual process is exactly the same. And you run out of time in exactly the same way you run out of time on a tiny movie. It really was striking to me how similar the process was. Not just similar, but how exactly alike they were.
And do you also mean like the creative process and what it means
process.
For your role as a director?
Exactly. There was no difference whatsoever. I think I learned more in post-production than I did in the actual principal photography of the film.
Oh yeah, in what way?
Part of it was just like trying things out. Like with Ain't Them Body Saints, post-production was like 9 weeks long. It was very rushed. And we finished it, and then the movie was done, and that was it. And with Pete's Dragon, we were in post for over a year.
Wow.
And just, getting the edit there, which the edit itself didn't take that long, but then the fine tuning took a long time. The visual effects took a long time. I learned a lot about visual effects. That was, again, something that was not hard to do on set because the dragon wasn't there. So you always know, like, okay, we're gonna figure that part out later. That was very easy when we were shooting. But then once you're in post, figuring out how to bring the visual effects into the world that we had created, make the visuals all cohere in a way that was aesthetically pleasing to me.
Yeah.
Because everyone has their own standards for VFX and for color and for all of the elements that come together in post-production.
Yeah.
And I needed to learn how to communicate my own tastes and to understand what those tastes were, because I'd never really thought about it before, because I'd never done a movie with visual effects like that.
Elliot. Come on!
One of the actors you've worked with on Pete's Dragon was Robert Redford, of
Yes.
course. You reunited for The Old Man and the Gun. Is it true that it was Robert Redford himself who sent you an article, a profile on this bank robber and asked you to do this film?
Yeah, he had been wanting to play this character for years. Like this was this was someone he was aware of, and he had been wanting to make a movie and to play the part of Forrest Tucker for quite a long time. And after he saw Ain't Them Body Saints, I'm sure he just thought, okay, well, David's from Texas, which is where Forrest Tucker was from, and he's also makes crime movies, I guess, because that was all he'd seen in my work, and he'd liked it. And so we met and discussed it, and of course, I was at that point in my career especially, hadn't met that many movie stars before. It was the idea that Robert Redford would want to make a movie with me was incredibly exciting and daunting and scary, but more than anything else, just really exciting.
You just couldn't say no.
Oh, of course, yeah. I was like, if you want me, of course, I will happily do this.
Oh my God, but he's like the Sundance Kid. He's Jeremiah Johnson, and he's asking you to do this movie with him. That's also a very big passion project.
Yeah, he's very good at coming down to earth and meeting you on your level. So I was so nervous meeting him the first time, and he quickly just casts all that nervousness aside. When
How
he
did he do it? I mean, how was it? Was it his approach?
You walk through the room and is like, "Hey, David, I'm Bob Redford," and I'm like, "Of course I know," but just the way he introduces himself, it just puts you at ease. He's been doing it for so long; he knows exactly how to do that.
Yeah, but how was that during the process of making the movie? I mean, did that combination of this being Robert Redford's passion project and him being such an experienced actor
and director
did it weigh on you during the shooting process?
Well, the thing that lucked out to my advantage was that we were developing Pete's Dragon and Old Man and the Gun at the same time, and I was writing the scripts at the same time, and then Pete's Dragon was just ready to go first, and so I asked him if he would be interested in being in it. And he said yes, and so we got to make that movie. And he was...
So you made Pete's Dragon first.
We made Pete's Dragon
Yeah.
first. And I got to know him on that movie as a director. And I got to understand the way in which he likes to work. And also I got to learn about how generous he is as an actor. Because even though he is a director and he's made great films, he never comes to set with his director hat on. He's there to act, and he wants me to direct. Yeah. And he's incredibly supportive in that way. Now, the very first day on set, I was so nervous that I called him Mr. Redford this, Mr. Redford that. Like, I was like always being very cautious. And he just put me at ease and let me know that he was there to be directed by me.
Yeah.
So by the time we got to Old Man the Gun, we had a working relationship, we knew one another, and it went off without a hitch.
That's great. And you can call him Bob now.
Yes, exactly. He finally let me know. He's like, don't call me Mr. Redford. That's my father's name.
Come on.
What did I tell you? Magic.
You come across as a very, as a filmmaker with a very clear vision, but also as a very modest man. Are you also very modest on set?
Probably. I like our sets to be very relaxed and to be focused, and everyone, we're there to get a job done, but I want it to be fun. I mean, making movies is hard. It's not like it's not like manual labor or anything, but it is a hard job.
And it's teamwork.
It's teamwork,
Yeah.
It's very collaborative, and you have to be open to all of the energy of all of your collaborators, and you have to channel all of that and process it towards one final thing, and that final thing is usually the vision that I have.
Yeah.
And that vision is both incredibly precise, but also very malleable. And I can just listen to what's going on, listen to the day, be open to what people are giving me and push things left or right as I need to. But ultimately, it winds back up exactly where I envisioned it to begin with. But we sometimes take very circuitous routes getting there.
Yeah. I don't know where in the process Robert Redford saw the movie for the first time, but what was his first response?
I think he called me, and I was in a casting session for another project, and I got a voicemail, and I think he just said, David, this is Forrest Tucker, the movie's excellent.
Oh my God, that's like the best
He's
voicemail
like,
you probably ever
fantastic.
got.
It was fantastic. I saved it on my computer.
Dispatch. Think we found our watch and dad. Over.
Are you requesting backup?
No sign of a suspect. Got some kids stuff. Blue car. Leave the scene.
All units posted on North I-35 in pursuit of suspect now believed to be driving a blue four-door sedan. Repeat, blue four-door sedan. State Highway Patrol's engaged.
Yes, sir. All right. Can I take it? Hey, excuse me. Need some help?
No, I'm good. Well, damn thing started choking up about a mile back. I tried to make for the next exit, but it conked out.
Let me take a look.
Think it's the radiator?
That could be.
Is it shot?
Wouldn't be surprised.
You know anything about cars?
No, not really.
Let's talk about The Green Knight. Mm-hmm. The Green Knight is your adaptation from the 14th century poem. Mm-hmm. What fascinated you about this story?
When I first read it in college, in my freshman English literature class, it was the last thing we read after a semester of just being deeply enmeshed in Western literature, like the canonical titles of early Western literature. And so I was pretty My eyes were all worn out. I was very bleary-eyed. I was barely focusing on things. But the strangeness of the poem really caught my attention. It almost played like a horror film, with the decapitation, and then the head was talking, and all of this imagery was so violent and eerie, and then there's a degree of eroticism to the text that was surprising to me at that age. Like, to read something from the 14th century and have it be so ribald was unexpected. But later on, when I decided I wanted to make a medieval fantasy movie, I was really just captivated with the idea of making a movie about a knight on a journey. I really wanted to just do a quest film.
Yeah.
Have a knight on a horse who starts at one place and winds up in another and has various adventures along the way.
And learns a lot of lessons.
Learns a lesson of some sort, although I didn't know what it would be yet. And so I was thinking about what that quest would be and what the adventures would be, and thought back to Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and thought, okay, well, maybe I could use that as sort of the template for this movie I might make, the script I might write. And so I reread the poem and very quickly got very excited with the idea of not just using it as a template, but by actually adapting it very closely and honoring the poem in a way that I hadn't intended. And reading it then, this was in 2018, so a good 17 years after I'd read it for the first time, it was really interesting to read it from a new perspective and to understand it not just as a crazy, weird, violent medieval poem, but as something that really taps into an essential element of humanity, which is the responsibility we have as human beings to live our lives with integrity and to be good people.
So it was a very personal project for you.
It wound up being. I never go into any movie thinking it's going to be that personal. And then they become very, very personal. By the time I'm done with them, I'm like, this is the most personal thing I've ever made. But over the course of making them, they get more and more personal. And I think that's just the natural flow of things. Like, if you invest that much time in any one thing, it's going to become personal no matter what. With Pete's Dragon, I thought, oh, well, this is a Disney movie. It's not going to be personal. It's going to be a fun kids' adventure movie. But by the time I was done writing the script, I was like, this is the most personal thing I've ever written.
Is it also why you always write your own scripts and why you also edit a lot of movies yourself?
Editing and writing are sort of the same thing. You were taking a language and using it to tell a story. And in this case, when you're editing a film, you're using the language of cinema. And so the skill set is exactly the same, and the process is very similar. And writing, for me, is also the first step of directing, because you're deciding what is going to be perceived by the audience. Even if you're not writing specific camera moves into the script, you're laying the groundwork for the decisions you're going to be making about where to put the camera, what lens to use, how long a dolly shot is going to last, things like that. So they are all part and parcel, like they come with the package of filmmaking. And I don't know if I'd be able to do as good of a job if I wasn't participating in each one of those stages.
Make a move or I shall make mine. What is this? A trick? Stand up and face me! What do you expect me to do? Very well. Very well. You laid down your challenge. I accepted it, and accept it still. Never forget what happened here! Upon this Christmas Day.
While watching the round table scene, the first round table scene in The Green Knight, with the Green Knight coming in for the first time, the whole backdrop was
Yeah.
hand painted, even some of the extras.
Just in one shot, but it is one of my favorite shots in the movie for that reason. I'm a big fan of traditional glass matte paintings, where the sets would be, in classic movies all the way up into the 90s.
Yeah, it's old movie magic,
Yeah,
like in Star Wars.
Yeah, you just get a big piece of glass and you'd
Yeah.
paint the set on it, and then you'd shoot through that glass or composite it together in post. And I really wanted to do that on Green Knight. I wanted to have traditional glass mats all through the movie, and it wasn't practical for what we were doing because it just takes so much time, and there's no flexibility. You have to be very rigorous with what you're shooting because you have to shoot these two elements that have to line up perfectly. So we ultimately didn't shoot any while we were in principal photography, but in post there was one shot that I never managed to get, and I was looking at some other footage and I was like, well, we could create this shot if I take an element from our principal photography and then expand it with a matte painting. And my brother's a painter, and so I asked him if he could do it. So he did. He painted a wider shot, a big section of the set, and then we didn't have that many background actors in because we just couldn't afford that many costumes. And so I was like, add in as many as you can, add in as many extra people as you can. And so they're all in, they're in there.
Well. Yeah.
I love knowing that there's like a painting right there, and it's only there for a few seconds, but it really makes that shot impactful.
This notion of handmade craftsmanship, it seems to be a recurring theme in your films, whether it's in the music score, whether it's in details like this. What does it tell us about you? I mean, do you have a large appreciation for?
Yeah, I really like things where you can feel the craftsmanship behind it. I really like things that aren't so smooth and mass produced that you see, you don't see the seams, you don't see the rough edges. I really like having those rough edges in everything, whether it's the houses that I live in or the films that I make. I want them to have those unique qualities that make them special and memorable and indicate to the audience that they could have been made by nobody else. So I always am like looking for ways to enhance that aspect of the films. Like if there's something that feels a little too perfect, I usually like roughen it up a little bit.
Yeah. So it's not a coincidence that we see a lot of the characters in your movies handwriting.
Things. I wish I still wrote letters by hand, but I love handwriting. I have terrible handwriting. I have no penmanship whatsoever.
So it's not your handwriting we see in a lot of your movies.
Well, in Ain't the Body Saints it is.
Oh,
and that's when I learned, like, my handwriting should never be in a close-up. It's my hand doing all the close-up letter
Because
writing.
a lot of your characters do a little bit of handwriting.
It's the motif.
Whether it's a spell or a letter.
I at first it was very subconscious, but now I'm like, I see it now. Now I see it in all of my films, and it's like, okay, now it's a very conscious thing.
Oh.
But I like watching people write letters, and I like seeing them on screen. I like seeing handwriting on screen. And in Ain't the Body Saints, I was going to take a cue from Godard, and there's a scene where Rooney Mara writes a letter, and I was like, I just want to see the letter. I want to see it, and we're gonna watch her write it in a close-up and read it as she writes it. And it would have lasted for 5 minutes, and I think the movie would have rejected that. And the audience would have rejected it as well, but something about that was really appealing to me. I miss the days when I had the time and wherewithal to actually write letters and send them to people and get them in return. And it's they come very few and far between these days.
Yeah. Looking back on the movies you've done so far, what do you think is the most valuable lesson you've learned about directing films?
I think to just be confident in my own vision for the films and to know that I know what I want. Early on in the early films, and even now still, I will sometimes be convinced that I'm wrong or think that other people will know better than I do what the movie needs. And that's not to say that they don't. It's not to say that my collaborators don't have tremendous input or that they know certain things more than I do. But if something feels wrong to me, I need to speak up and raise my hand and say, no, that's not right, as opposed to just assuming that whoever made that decision knows better than I do, because ultimately they don't. I know this is the one instance in my life in which I can say with some authority that like I do know better than everyone else because I've been living with this for so long, and it came from me, and I have a very clear idea of what it needs to be. And I think when I made Saint Nick and Ain't the Body Saints and Pete's Dragon, I definitely let myself be convinced every now and then that I didn't know what was best for the movie. And now I know that with a fair amount of authority that I'll know. Even if I don't know, if you ask me a question on set and I don't know the answer, I'll know that I'll find the answer and that answer will be right.
You
and
can
I'll know,
trust them, Dad,
I can
right
trust
now.
that. And I know that I'm also wrong sometimes, but that when I'm wrong, I'll find the right answer after I've made the mistake. and I'll find the solution, and then I can find the solution, that the solution is findable, that it's not just that we're not fumbling in the dark.
No.
It's taken me a long time. Some people from the very first movie, I think, will just jump right in and know that, and they have that sense of authority. It's taken me a while to gain it, but as I've gained it, I feel that the movies have gotten better, and I've also been happier with them.